welcome to Google. My name is Leah Worbs Lundy, and I lead the University Programs team here in Cambridge. And I'm very excited to be hosting Flying Bridges for today's Work Ready Women event. We want to extend a really warm welcome to all of you students, all of you professionals in the audience who have come today to network, to support each other, find new ways to power up. So at Google, I've been really fortunate to have access to a great network of colleagues, of mentors, of supervisors, all who are women. And I've also been able to mentor some younger women in the course of my career, and that's been really rewarding and really exciting. So for those of you students in the audience, and can I have the students raise their hands real quick? Welcome, students. I just want you to know that, the professional women, so I guess professional women, now raise your hands. So the professional women are really here for you. They're here for themselves too. It's always good to continue to build that network and help, but we're really here to sort of pay that forward to the next generation because we know that you as students, once you're young professionals in a couple years, will continue to pay that forward and on and on and on. So just talking a little bit about sort of my own experiences, last year I participated in a women's leadership course at Google. And I really enjoyed meeting women across different functions and across different career levels. And what really struck me about that course was how universal the issues that we were facing are. We talked about feeling nervous about how we might be perceived in certain settings. We talked about being afraid to put ourselves forward for certain opportunities. And we talked about feelings of competition with our peers, but also with other women. What was really eye-opening was that these issues aren't something you just grow out of. Very unfortunately, as I'm sure our leadership panel will say, you don't get promoted to a certain level and then automatically just, become immune to these challenges. But, talking about them, being in a supportive environment, and being able to kind of hash out issues, get perspective from others, and get support from other women is a really, really incredible thing. So that's why I'm excited to be here today, and I hope you all are too. And before we turn it over to our leadership panel, I want to get a little bit more of a sense of why you all are here. Today is really driven by you. So, we built the room. It's up to you to work it. And today is really driven by your own experiences, what you want to get out of this session. So I'd love it if a couple people could just let us know why you signed up today and what you hope to get out of the session. So just raise your hand and I'll give you the mic. Oh, come now is not the time to be shy. There we go. All right.
Let me stand up. Hi. I'm Natalie. I'm a Sloan Fellow. Some of the fellows are here too. Raise your hand. We're students at MIT, and we're students for many years, so we're just trying to reinsert ourselves to how to be a student. And network here is super cool, like Cambridge, a lot of tech staff. I'm from technology, so I just wanted to get to know a lot of more people around the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Nancy Pazienza. I'm an engineer at GE, and I know how hard it was for me getting in as an engineer in an all-male environment and working through all those things, and I'm at the point where I want to help others along and do what I can to share experiences.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Uli. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm an engineering manager at Sensata Technologies. I'm here to mentor other students and also network with other like-minded engineers. I'm also an executive MBA at Sloan, so all the Sloanies, I want to connect with you as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Dr. Terry. I'm an executive coach, and I'm just here to hone my craft and get to know a lot of beautiful women and see what's going on in the world with you, because I want to be better at what I do. I've helped some people change jobs and move up, and I want to be there to support you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Like I said, we're really excited to have everyone here and to get to know you all a little bit better throughout the day. And I hope we can all go through today feeling really confident, really excited. There's a lot of support in this room, and I think we'll have a lot of fun today. So, with no further ado, and perfect timing, we will turn it over. All right, we will turn it over to our leadership panel. And Kim, I'll let you introduce because I left the piece of paper on the other side of the room. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Is this on? Yep. Okay. Hi, thank you all for coming. I feel like I know Oh. Well, if that's what we're doing, Bobbie. No. I feel like I know all of you because I've been looking at your awesome applications and corresponding with you, Veronica and I, for a long time. So thank you all. So isn't that a little too loud? No? Okay. So thank you all for coming. Before I introduce the panel, I would love to see a show of hands for women who have had mentors, sponsors, or a significant person that has helped them along the way, career-wise. Okay, great. Now I'd like to see those same hands stay up if that person was a woman. Okay, so what would you say? That's about a third? Would you say that's a third? Half? Half. Okay, so good. Okay, so we're going to speak with the leaders today about just that topic, advocacy, with also some more practical decision-making, priority setting, purpose for getting into leaderships, and some of the challenges, both challenges and opportunities within systems, which would be within the Tyco system, within an Intel system, within the larger corporate settings, and also the external systems, society, for example. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce my panel. Just names and titles, which you all were able to look at their bios online. So if you want more information, please go. Okay, so this is Miss Anita Santos. She is the VP of Marketing for Tyco Security Products. And also is very heavily involved in the angel investing community. This is Miss Bobbie Carlton. She represents the entrepreneur in all of you. She started off, I believe, with Carlton PR and Marketing, and then was so inspired to do things for women and connecting. She's the ultimate connector. She started Innovation Nights and Innovation Women. And then to my left, you might notice someone looks a little, one of these things is not like the other. It's okay. And this would be Mr. Clem Cole, who is an architect. What did you say to me? Supercomputers? He builds supercomputers. I think that's it. You lead an international team for Intel, and so he will be representing the male involvement, male perspective in all of this discussion. And then last but certainly not least, we have Andrea Cox from GE. She works in the aviation department. She has particular insights on the opt-in, so once you've opted out, getting back into the workforce and how you can successfully navigate it, because as an executive of, quality and compliance. Yeah, quality and compliance, she actually opted in and did quite a good job at doing so. So, with that, what we're going to do, the format is really going to be that this is going to be an informal dialogues between leaders, talking about pathways again and challenges and opportunities. So I'd like to open it up with a discussion on priorities. How do you set your priorities? Anita.
Oh, boy. So I'm going to first disclose right up front, I'm a single mom, 2 girls, one's 13, one's 7, and my oldest child has special needs. So it's really difficult to balance. And, if anyone tells you like, oh, you can have it all, I think it was once I was watching Oprah and they were talking about this whole work-life balance. And somebody said, you can't necessarily have it all at once. And I think that's really what's important. And a lot of it as women, it's about getting rid of and letting go of the guilt that you carry around, because you can't be everything to everyone all the time, or you will drown. You will forget yourself, you will lose yourself. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind. So sometimes I'm the best mother, and sometimes I'm the best employee, and sometimes I'm the best partner, and sometimes I'm the best friend, but I can't be that all the time. And I think when setting priorities, it does come down to a little bit of firefighting, and you really have to think about, short-term, mid-term, and long-term and plan that way. Because realistically, you just, everything's going to be a priority at some point in your life when you're trying to manage all of these things, and you can't do it. So anybody that tells you that you can do it all at once, they're lying. They're lying.
And so, Andrea, when it comes to priority setting, how do you decide? So let's use Sheryl Sandberg for an example. Okay, so Sheryl Sandberg had a husband who stayed at home and was in charge of child rearing. Then we all know, sadly, what happened to him. So all of a sudden, Sheryl Sandberg had to completely change her lifestyle, change her priorities, how she functioned. So, Andrea, as a leader in an executive position, how do you handle crises, and how do you set the priorities when you're planning on doing one thing, but something has come up that needs your attention?
So I don't think there's any easy way, and usually it's, okay, my kid's sick, and I have to go present to some huge population, you know what? But then you have to take a step back, and my mentor, the male that had, been my mentor for many years, he always said, don't panic. I'd come in and freak out, he's like, don't panic. Don't panic, there's always a solution. You just have to make sure you understand what's the most important right now. And you just have to take that step back and understand. And for me, and anybody who has kids, it's always your kids first, right? So, and the thing you have to get to is everybody understands that. Most everybody either has kids or nephews or nieces, and if somebody's sick, all you have to say is, I can't. The other piece is having backup, having a support system where somebody can back you up in that presentation, that meeting, that whatever you're missing. But you have to, it's one of those crisis management, 101, okay, what is that most important thing? And you've got to be okay with the decision. It's like you have to evaluate that and move on, no regrets. That's kind of my big thing is, and if you make too many plans going forward, you're going to regret too many things looking back, right? So making sure that, okay, I'm okay with this decision and I'm okay with what happens. And so to relate that, so I have two boys, 15 and just turned 12. And, I went part-time. I worked part-time for 8 years. Actually, I've had an alternative work schedule for 15. I took time off and, like you said, trying to jump back in. But when I did that, I made that decision, my family's more important, right? So back 15 years ago, it wasn't like you could just say, okay, that's my priority, GE's going to support me, and I'm going to be an executive. It's kind of like, okay, I'm putting my career on hold, and actually Nancy was spoke before, paved the way, right? Lots of women went part-time, but it was, okay, put my career on hold. And I made that decision, and it was no looking back. That's my decision. I've come out of that great. I was recognized for the work that I had done. I was promoted since then. But it was that, okay, I'm okay going forward. So that priority, and then, you get to work, right? And I got this priority versus that. And it's just really understanding what's most important on the outcomes when you're trying to make those decisions, because we're all going to balance the work family, but then you have, okay, well, I've got this vice president needing me to be here and that vice president needing me to be there. Well, crap, what do I do, right? And then it was a week and a half ago, I was supposed to fly to Cincinnati, and I'm stuck in the tunnel in Sumner and missing my flight and not able to get there, right? What do you do? And you lean on your network, you lean on the people that can help you, and it all worked out, presented via telepresence. And that's the other thing that I'll add, and I know I'm going on too long, is you just calm down, take a step, don't panic. It will work out. And you kind of get to these things where it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. I can't do this. And you get to the other side, and it's like, okay, I'm still alive. Nobody's dead. That's good. Okay. So,
thank you, Andrea. So, Clem, we've heard Anita and Andrea reference family. And for our younger members here who may not have children, or for women who are maybe planning on having children, I'm sure that this comes up all the time before you're embarking on your career, the whole work-life balance. And so, Clem, I want to ask you, as a male, The priority setting that we just heard from two of our esteemed leaders, are they similar to what your priority setting thought processes are?
Certainly. Similar, but by definition, different. And biology is biology. And women have to deal with a question that men do not have to deal with. That's just reality. And so as a male, I can't empathize. All I can do is support. And I think the comment that you made, I think, is the really important one, was or is society understanding that a kid being sick is no different than being stuck in the Sumner Tunnel and it's going to work out, and I think, I'm of a transitional generation that it was only 1 in 7 women that went through engineering school when I went through engineering school, but there were 1 in 7. I also have 4 sisters. I have 4 brothers too, but I have 4 very, very strong professional sisters, of which our moderator knows one of them pretty well. So I'm used to, I grew up around a model that was that. To be open, my daughter is now a young engineer working for GE at this point. My son is still in college. Now, my wife surprised me dramatically 20 years ago and she was a professional, and she was the director of public libraries and had been for 20 years, and she made the choice you made. She said, I want to be home for my daughter. And so she didn't go back until Matt, our son, was capable of being a little bit more on his own. It's not clear he still is, but that's a separate issue. So she went back to work at that point in time and came back in. As a male, I have to recognize that's a choice you are making. It's never bothered me. I understand, and accept is the wrong word, but I understand society does what society does, and boys are taught to be, quote, the breadwinner, et cetera. One thing I think that has changed really dramatically between our father's generation and our mother's generation and current is it's pretty hard to be part of the middle class without being a dual income family at this point in time. So that by definition, any male that's going to have, or for that matter, couples of any type, you've got to be supportive of the other one. And I think that's the key, is how do you set priorities, is recognize the family is something in there. Now, my wife might say I was not as good as I could have been, that, I don't know. She's not here. I'll let her, make that decision. I have tried very hard to be an example. And I think and believe that what we have to do is we have to change society. And that's where the real issue comes down.
But Clem, if I may, going with the decision. So again, Andrea and Anita went right to the family and the children. And so when you at work are making, well, your children are in college now, but let's go back a little. Was that part of your professional decision-making process?
Sometimes. Probably it was not all the time.
And so my question to the panelists would be, how much of that difference in the priorities impacts the pathway to leadership?
Difference in priorities
of having to consider the work-life balance, the friends, versus not. Is that just an acceptable truth or not? Does it matter? I mean, I think that's the grain of what I'd like to suss out. Does it matter if women have to shift different priorities? And probably a longer list of priorities.
Or some of us don't.
Right.
I have 2 kids. I'm also the perfect 1950s dad. I have a full-time stay-at-home husband. He has been home it'll be 20 years in March. And I have very rarely had to make the decision about work versus kids because he has been there 100% full time to pick up the anything I drop. This past year, my now 19-year-old son, who is a freshman in college, took a gap year and worked for me. And I spent more time with him in the past year, he was my constant companion, than I probably have the rest of his entire life. A lot of moms look at me like I've got two heads and antenna or something, but we made a decision as a couple early on that we didn't feel that both of us could have a career without having someone else to raise our kids. Also doesn't hurt that my husband is a musician, and if we were relying upon his salary, we'd probably be living in a van somewhere. I was significantly more advanced in my career. I was an executive with large enterprise software companies, and he was customer service at a bank. So some of the decision was made for us, but it also came down to our innate personalities as well. I was very career focused. Actually, before I met my husband, I had never even imagined having children. And he wanted children, and when I was with him, I also wanted children, and I love my boys, and we get along great, and we do things together that are probably not the traditional mom-son things. I just took my younger son to the Ig Nobel Awards last week. We do scientific things because I feel it's my responsibility to actually expose them to work-related stuff and STEM-related stuff because my husband doesn't. He takes them to the museum and to concerts and things like that. So we have almost completely flip-flopped back to 1950s. So a little bit different perspective. And I have literally, I can't even think of a time, oh, actually I can. I can think of one time where I had to make a decision, and my older son at the time had chicken pox, and I was on my way to Japan. And unfortunately, I discovered when I landed in Japan that not only did my son have chicken pox, my husband had, what's the adult version of chicken pox?
Oh, shingles.
Shingles, yes. I called in my mother-in-law. You've got to go in and save the day because I'm in Japan. So I could have turned around, come back home, but I figured, I figured I'm very replaceable. So my mother-in-law raised my husband. I figured she wouldn't kill off the next generation too.
Well, I guess that leads me to thinking, have we seen a shift in women who are the primary breadwinners in the companies who have stay-at-home husbands?
So I'm kind of halfway between that. So I'm definitely the primary breadwinner, and actually my husband was laid off and just spent 2 years out of work. So he became that, but he's not that at the core. So he struggled for 2 years being that stay-at-home dad. Luckily, the kids were older at that point, so he could kind of deal a little bit more. But he was not in his happy little place. And so I think the biggest thing, back to the double income thing, which Clem mentioned, is you kind of have to be there to do what you want. And my husband and I and kids actually are big bicycle racers, and so we need to make a lot of money to buy a lot of bikes. So we have priorities, right? So exactly. But the biggest thing came when, I was the career person, and he wanted a career, but I wanted to excel. And so I have, but he always wanted to have that job. And we got to the point where we had kids, and then it became an issue. And so he's thinking, well, yeah, but I have to go to work. I'm like, but so do I, and the kid's sick. Why is it me that has to stay home? So that feeling is certainly still there. I think the biggest thing I did was when the kids were, I would go to my hairdresser, and which, as you can tell, doesn't take long. And so we would bitch and moan about about the husbands, and and she said, all right, I want you to go home, and I'm gonna do the same thing. We're gonna list out all of the things that we do, just me. And all of the things that he does, just him. And he took out the trash, And it was the only thing that just he did, right? So I did the doctor's appointments, I did the dentist, I did all of this stuff. And I think the biggest thing, which I think Anita should jump in after this, is ask for help. That is the biggest thing. And it took me a long time to write that and actually bring it up to him, because I was so mad at him for making me do it all. You know, I'm working full time, I have the bigger job, and yet I'm still the one that has to make the dentist appointment, bring them, figure it out, call the parents. Well, did you call somebody? If you can't be here, then did you call somebody? Well, you know, why can't you? So I think that's the biggest thing. So we talked about leaning on your network at work. It's leaning on your network and being okay with asking the neighbor to take the kid early in the morning to get him on the bus. My husband won't do that still, right? And so, but you have to be able to ask for help.
So I think it was you, Andrea, that said the support network is what's key, and it's so true. And around career decisions, so I have made certain career decisions around where I thought my support network would be. So there were relocation opportunities denied, because if you're going to move to an area where you know no one, be prepared, because that means how effective you are at work is going to suffer. Your neighbors, your parents, you know, if they're still alive and they're healthy and they can help, you know, that's a blessing. So, you know, you have siblings in the area. If you move away from that and you take a family with you, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. And trust me, as someone who's used multiple nannies over the years, it's not easy. You think, oh, well, I'll just get a nanny or an au pair. But, you know, those are relationships. And those people aren't just, you know, people that you're hiring. They're taking care of your children, and you're dealing with them. They become part of your family. And if it doesn't fit, and not because they're not good people, but you just need to have that fit. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you're on to the next person. And while you're waiting for the next nanny to come in the house, you know, that's 4 weeks where you're working from home and you're trying to, you know, get the kids to the doctor's appointments. Oh, and you're on a conference call at the same time. Sure, go ahead. Travel's approved. Yeah. and you're trying to juggle all of that. So, yeah, I know that I definitely made career decisions based upon, you know, how far my opportunity was going to take me away from my support system. And I think that's just a reality of what you're going to need to confront. But I think it's really important to keep that in mind.
Okay, so speaking about support and networks, I mentioned earlier systems. So this larger societal system and the system that's within the organizations that you work. And so I have a couple questions on this. One, systems at work. Have you observed that there are different systems to help support women on their pathway to leadership? And if so, how do I want to say this? Because we're being taped. How impactful are they? And how useful to helping you get up the ladder? Okay.
Yeah. I work for myself.
Yeah, she works for herself. And
Totally support myself.
Yeah.
So for example, you want me to give some examples? So for example, and Clem, I want you to step in with this about the culture that you work with. So maternity leave, paternity leave, opting in, opting out, women's networks at work. GE has a very strong women's network. Tyco has a very strong women's network, who are here today. Intel does too. Are these systems that are beginning to be put in place that are really helping women?
Let me take a shot at a little of this. I think it has changed. Quite frankly, you know, when my kids were born, when my daughter was born, I was at a startup. It was a little bit different. But when my son was born, I was working for another large corporation, and there was no concept of bonding or paternity leave or whatever. You they had maternity leave. And it's interesting because I have a bunch of young men and young women who are, recent PhDs, what have you, that are working in my organization, and they seem to be replicating. I keep asking, did we put something in the water? It's great. I mean, I as a father, I think it's wonderful to watch, and it's neat to watch the young men now actually spend 6-8 weeks. And one of them, his wife is he's a PhD, a computer scientist. His wife's a PhD chemist, and so she took the first maternity leave right when the baby was born. Then she went back, and then he took a spot there, so that they didn't have to start the nanny thing, to start working that piece of it. And I think that gets back to the comment that you made, of being the best. Picking what role and what hat am I wearing right now, and how can I be the best at that hat? And I think that is something that is changing. I suspect if you catch the women in my generation, it wasn't as good. I think it's better for the next. Are we there yet? Probably not. But I think you put your finger on it.
So I would add, so GE has done a great job. We've had a women's network since 1998. Very, very solid. It was the first diversity network. And the women that I know here are in different businesses, but I wouldn't know them from my day job. And so when we talk about network, even if it's to go out for a cup of coffee or a beer, in my case, just to go and have somebody to sound off, right? Or I got this situation, I just need to talk it through with somebody. And so that is really, really big on the Women's Network, and I've made more connections there that have been long-lasting, that, it's so important. I think, to Clem's point, the big companies are coming around. It takes a lot of time to steer that aircraft carrier. It's got a pretty solid path. So, and it's the culture, right? So we can put the programs in place, and it's great, but you've got to have the culture around those programs to support it. And so I think it was a year or two ago that they just started paternity leave, and they increased the maternity leave. And so it's been changing. But, you still see, wow, you're going to be out for 8 weeks. Wow, you're going to be out for 3 months. It's kind of like, yeah. So to Clem's point, we have a long way to go, but it is certainly changing. And it's got to be us that do it. It's got to be the Clems of the world. We talk about, is it really important to have a male kind of be part of this? Absolutely, because if you think of who's at the leadership of these, at least big company that I work in, it's still all middle-aged white males. And if they aren't being the advocates to change that culture, then we're going to have to do it ourselves, and it's more of that grassroots that's going to take far longer to do.
And I think, so I've worked for always big companies, and, there's been some that have been more progressive than others. And I think what it comes down to, it's less about the policies, and it's more about the manager that you're working for. Right. Because the maternity leave and the paternity leave, that's a very short moment in time, to be quite honest with you. You'll be surprised how quickly it goes by. But really, it's about that day-to-day flexibility. And if you have a manager that just is in that 1950s nuclear that can't relate to the situation that you're in, and more importantly, can't empathize with you, then it's going to be difficult. It's going to be really, really challenging. So, I think it's more so about the manager, and it's less so about the company's policies. So look for a progressive manager, right? That's really what's important. And then the other thing, too, is your responsibility as a manager. So when you're a manager, this is not just about flexibility for women. This is about flexibility for men, too.
For people.
For people, right, people. So, because this is what's really important. Behind that man, most likely, is a working woman. So if you create imbalances within your own team, you're just propagating the problem.
Yep.
You're not really solving anything. So you have to keep that in mind, and for women that are also single and don't have children, don't treat them like they are an endless supply of a work stream for you. They deserve their time off too, and their work-life balance. It's really important to keep that in mind when you're managing people. It's really difficult.
One of the things I think we also have to think about is American attitudes versus international attitudes. My first son I had when I was working for a Canadian company, and the difference in support was unreal compared to when I had my second son and I was working for a US company. I nursed both boys for a year, and just the presence of a private place to go to pump every day was immediately not an issue at my first company. And I had to fight tooth and nail to get a lock on my door, on my office door. I was fortunate I had an office with the second company. And it was also, just an endless supply of angst and embarrassment and everything else, dealing with that on a daily basis. And, also even just during the time I was pregnant with both companies, one company immediately jumped in and said, what do you need? What's your situation in terms of your travel? The other company was like, what are we going to do with you? It was almost like they had never dealt with a senior woman who was going to take time off or was pregnant. I actually got a call while I was in labor to have a discussion about layoffs in my company, in my department. I have to tell you, the person who got laid off was unbelievably upset with me, and I had no idea they'd been laid off because I was drugged. I'm like, you want to have this conversation with me now? But there is a very distinct difference. I had a person who supposedly worked for me while I was at Cognos, Canadian company, who was Scandinavian, who in the 7 years I was there had 4 kids. She actually never came back at any point. She just would take her leave and then have another kid, take her leave, have another kid, take her leave, and have another kid. It was 7 years. I had a spot for her open, though, at any time should she come back. I had no idea who she was, never met her. And that's something you have to think about also in terms of big company, little company. Right now, if I was doing that, with my 10 employees and, every single person is super important, how are national policies and healthcare and things like that going to impact me as a small business? It wasn't as much of an issue, obviously, with a big company and thousands of employees. But for me as a small company, it makes a huge difference. So, we have to think about kind of the policy level, the company level, and the individuals who are managing a department and managing a company and how they impact things. I have people who work for me right now who have small children. They're dropping off at daycare. I know they're not going to be in the office at 9 o'clock. They're dropping off at 9 o'clock. So we schedule around them. So there's a combination of things that have to kind of all come together to make life work.
I wanted to add one more real quick thing, and that is that because of the policy situations, Washington or whoever gets caught up, big companies tend to react in big programs and want things to change instantaneously. This is a societal problem. This has taken a couple of 100 years in American society to build to where it is. And as much as companies the size of mine would like it to be fixed in 1 year, it is not going to happen, no matter how much money we throw at it. And I spend a lot of time with my peers at the senior executive levels, reminding them, and I am very, very strongly involved with recruiting and absolutely want to make the right things happen. Your comment, it's all about your direct boss. I think that's the number one piece, and work it, but recognize this is going to take many generations. So, just as I said, I think it's better than it was now, but we still have way, 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 way far to go. Does that make sense?
spoken like a person who builds supercomputers. Am I making sense to everyone? So on that comment, actually, so there's a couple wrap-ups I'd like to say. One, the networks. Andrea, you had mentioned that it was great for coffee, to get to know people within the company. Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo has said there's a problem with the sisterhood, that we're not helping each other. And so my question about these networks that women have, are they serving to help women move up, or are they serving to have support when you've had a bad day? What should they serve as if they're not? Yeah, so describe how they're serving now, and then we can critique.
So one thing I would say is, just to build off of what Clem said also, is if we, we're big GE, right? If we've set our mind to a target and we say we're going to go get more women in STEM, well, darn right, we'll get more women in STEM because we can do that. You can measure it, it's a metric, and by gosh, we're going to do it. The problem is retaining those women, making them feel like they have a home when they get there. And then we were talking earlier about that 7 to 10 to 12 years. That's when we lose the women out of STEM in industry, particularly in a male-dominated environment. And so I think that's the key, is making sure that we have these networks to help give that support system. So if somebody's ready to leap, you grab them. Don't let them leap, right? And so all of us, it's that, pay it forward or put back or whatever. Pull some along with you is number one. And I think, and actually, I'm kind of putting this together as I'm saying it, but the big networks, it has been absolutely great, right? The network has been great, but are we that much better on our numbers? In GE, I don't know, in our higher level, right? In aviation, at least, we're still pretty much middle-aged white males, and they recognize it. But how do you do that? How do we shove ourselves in there as a women's network? Because it's the culture. It's still, So I'm not going to name names because people here would know, but
and we're taping.
And we're taping. But I heard of a senior leader saying, "Oh, well, that person's really great. This person was being evaluated to be promoted to executive, but she's just in the middle of having kids." Like, why does that enter? Why was that part of the conversation, right? And so I don't think that person even realized what they were saying, but you just took that person out of consideration because this senior high leader said this, therefore that's the way it is, right? So I think that there's a lot more that we can do as a women's network, and all of our networks, is how do we, and we've been talking about it for years, how do you break that ceiling? So again, we're good, we've done good things, but we're not there yet.
So Bobbie actually runs innovation nights. And so the reason I would like to bring that up as an external is, okay, so we have the internal networks that we need work. From an organization like Bobbie's, who connects women from all different fields, who have different interests, different life skills, experiences, are the external activities, such as Work Ready Women Power Up, part of the solution, where you're mixing the younger with the older and the cross-industry, cross-sector women?
So I've been in high tech now for 30 years, actually almost exactly. And in that, probably the first 27 years, I never went to a women-oriented event. I spent a lot of time in rooms with a lot of guys. And I always felt like I was uncomfortable in rooms with a lot of guys because it was always like me and, 400 guys or 300 guys. And I'm like, why would I want to do the same thing and be in a room with all just women? I was much more interested in gender balanced and more diverse conversations. It's like I'm sick and tired of going into a room and having the same conversation over and over again. A couple of years ago, I went to the Mass Women Conference, and was kind of horrified as I was walking the aisles, and I was getting offered everything from nail polish to scarves and jewelry. And I'm like, why are you doing this? You know, this is supposed to be a business-oriented conversation, and it just became a craft fair. At the same time, I'm in marketing. I look around and I say, well, that's smart. They're marketing to an audience they know is going to be there. They're marketing products, and these products are being developed specifically for women, so why wouldn't they market there? So there's this two parts of me that are, you know, smart, that's idiotic, smart, that's idiotic. And I spent a lot of time with this stuff, and when I started Innovation Women, which was an offshoot of Innovation Nights, the goal was to get more women on stage at conferences and events out there telling their story, because every time you're up on stage telling your story, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to connect with customers, with partners. If you're funding something, if you're getting investment, everybody in the audience could be a potential sale partner, whatever. So you have to get out and talk and communicate with people. So being in a room with only one type of audience was limiting. So the external audiences and the time that I spend in the evenings in the community, the last 7.5 years, we've run 90-something innovation nights. We've launched over 900 new products. I'm out a lot in the evening, and I'm relying on the fact that my husband's at home with the kids, and he's driving them to whatever practice and the doctor's office and everything like that. So having an event like this, for example, you know, during the day and escaping from the office during the day is helpful. Having breakfast meetings, that might be helpful, but it might be hard for somebody who's got to do drop-off. There's so many different aspects of this that I think we all have to look at the diverse options that we have and say, you know, this may not work for me, this may work for me, this might not work for you, this might not work for you. Everybody's got to make decisions based on themselves and what they can personally do. But I do think we have to get out of the conversations with the same old and start doing new things on a regular basis. Break out, look at the industry calendars and activities and stuff, and stop talking to the same people and start having different conversations. I have no idea if that answered your question.
It did, and more. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. So, okay, so going back to the sisterhood. So this will kind of wrap up sort of the sentiment on leadership and male involvement. Okay, so what is stopping women from being better mentors and sponsors for other women in the workplace? I mean, it happens. We know it happens. Why?
You know, it was funny. I just had a conversation, and maybe this will spark something. We had, back in the 90s, I think it was, we had, you know, you have beliefs or your, you know, whatever you kind of measure your people on, and we had energy, energize, edge, and something else. I can't remember. But I see some smiles because edge was the big thing. That was, okay, I can make a decision. I can be, you know, I don't know how to describe it. I can be edgy, right? But back then, if you had edge as a woman, you were a bitch. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh, I shouldn't have said that online. And so if you were brought up in that world, those are the leaders now that have kind of been that edgy kind of woman and not the soft, touchy kind of woman, which is, I think, what I would lean towards wanting somebody to be a mentor. And so maybe that's a piece of it, and I think that there's far more women out there that have that softer touch than there were, but they're not enough yet. And I think the other thing is, because you were talking about the innovation and outside, at least at GE, we're pretty focused inside, but getting outside will get us kind of the different view of how it's done, but I don't have time. You know, and I do get locked in that. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, my days are filled with 10 hours at least of work a day. I got to trade off with my husband on piano lessons and soccer and, you know, and then we bike race on the weekends. And it's like, okay, I can't add that. And so I think that with women trying to balance this whole thing and do in the evening and trying to manage with husband and who's going to do what, I have to go at night and do this innovation and pull people. It's hard. It's time. And I think we have to get out of that way, our own way, to do that.
So it's funny because one of my previous mentors was actually a man. And so it was really funny because I remember when I was talking to the HR leader about this opportunity to find a mentor. And I don't know why, I had it stuck in my head that it should be a woman, right? And I was just like, all right, so, what woman's going to mentor me? And the HR leader, she's like, well, why does it have to be a woman? And I'm just like, you know what, that's right. I'm like, that's absolutely correct. So I think that when you look across the spectrum here of who's in management, it's predominantly male leaders. And I think that we need to have male leaders mentoring women managers. That brings up complications, to be quite frank, right? You kind of always want to operate at arm's length. You're worried about, rumors or innuendos and all of this, but I think we need to get past that. And I think that is one of the things that the women's networks that companies have, and Bobbie's women's network that she's doing is helping with that, because it's bringing awareness. I don't know that we are pushing significant change all at once across these organizations, but I think we are building more awareness to what the issues are, and I think we are starting to pull men into the conversation, which is really the important piece of it. I was at an event for West Organization. It's a women's organization, and there was a gentleman in the audience who stood up and said, I don't wake up every day with the rest of the male population saying, how are we going to keep women down? It just, they're not thinking like that. They really aren't. And so what's going on is really, it's just an unawareness, right? So the more that we talk about it, the more that we engage, the more that we involve, the more awareness and a sensitivity is going to come up around that.
Can I add one thing? Because I had a mentor for 12 years. He retired 2 years ago. And my first, it was a assigned mentor. My first conversation with him, the get to know, he said, okay, well, you're part-time, when are you coming back full-time? I said, great, that's how this is going to start. He said, well, I have 2 kids. They're doing great, and they went through daycare. And I was like, wow, But he ended up being one of my best friends at work over years, but I think the piece that I brought to the table was I taught him. And so he's going to be that mentor, that person who can be your sponsor, talk about you really well behind your back. But I was also able to be that, I'm sorry, that's my decision. And you have to figure out how to manage that, and me as a mentee in that decision, even though it doesn't align with what you were brought up like.
Yeah, and I think also one of the conversations or the sayings I've heard is it's hard to pull others up when you feel like you're falling off the cliff yourself. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of social capital that you have to expend on championing other people. I think the original question was, why don't other women help other women? And I think there are ways that you can do that without expending so much social capital. You can advocate for other women, and you can amplify what they say. If you're in a meeting and, you find yourself and other women being talked over, this happens. You can't shut me up. Most of the time. And I've been in meetings where it's like, I'm saying something and it's ignored, and somebody else who happens to be male says it, and it's praised, and I'm like, wait a minute. So you often have to do a little bit of banding together, pointing out to the powers that be, if they happen to be male, and ignoring things. This is so-and-so's idea. And, there's a bit of sometimes strategy that has to go into that. So I think, paying attention to patterns that happen inside companies or inside organizations or inside industries overall is really important to figure out how to address those with strategies.
Thank you. So, male involvement and having a male as a mentor. This is a struggle. When we organized this event, and we also do the all-girl challenge, it's, well, can the boys come? Can men come? And the fact is that when boys are involved, for example, the girls will step back. In today's culture, getting the men to be involved, but not in their way, but in a mutually beneficial, and we'll stick with leadership, to get women to the top. What are the obstacles that, and I don't mean to treat you, Clem, like you're speaking for all of the male species, but generally speaking, what are the struggles that men feel who are not waking up wanting to put women down?
Well, I think you put a very interesting edge on one of the things that certainly I have watched in my career, and your comment of a aggressive woman being labeled something that rhymes with witch. Now, no, it's okay, and probably because I grew up around strong women, and I was always attracted to strong women, it never bothered me. I know guys that it bothers a lot. And so I think that's the example of what I get to when I say it's a societal problem, which you're not going to fix instantaneously. Your comment about, approach, can you be the leader and not be perceived as the aggressor? And by the way, I don't like males that take that role either. Frankly, I don't usually like to work with those type of people, period, regardless of, how they dress in the morning. Society generally has rewarded that group of people. So boys have tended to deal with that. And so we've got to figure out how to balance it right. And we've got to reward, as you said, the folks that come forward with for lack of a better word, softer touch, and recognize that those are the kind of people. I think part of it is attitude, that you can have. It's not an issue of being a bitch. It's an issue of if you are forward and, hey, we're going to make this succeed, and it's a we culture, then I think everybody wins. Did that make sense?